Hello, you guys. Hello, hello, hello. All right, this is my first live. Let's see. Okay, it's just 12 now. Thank you for joining. I'm gonna wait like another 30 seconds to a minute. I'm gonna get loosey-goosey on the spotlight. My little Mr. Mumu is right here. He's napping. If I get nervous at any point, I'm gonna pick him up and use him as my comfort animal. Okay. So this is, like I said, this is my first live. Hi. Hold on. Can I do a little... Anyway, I need to like not look at the comments right now because I get so distracted. Yes, Mercury is a very good puppy. My little monster. So this is my first live. Actually, this is not true. One time I tried to have a live. This was like some years ago. I was tripping on LSD. And I picked up the phone and I was like, I'm gonna go live and I'm gonna talk about, because when you're on LSD, you get all these like very interesting, your mind expands. But then like I was on the spotlight and I just couldn't utter a word. And I was like, you know what? I'm not doing this. And then ever since then, I had this like loaded thing about going live, So anyway, I'm now confronting all that. And it's time to move forward, right? So in this live video, I decided to address a couple of questions that somebody sent to me. And the first one actually is really interesting. It comes from my friend Ray, and he asked me to talk about the dark night of the soul and my possible experience of it. Of course, I had this experience in the past. Let's first define dark night of the soul. So, dark night of the soul happens, it's kind of like a period of spiritual dryness. It's when you are trying to, you're doing your work, but inside you start to feel kind of hopeless. You start to feel abandoned. You feel like God or the divine beings or whatever have abandoned you and you're kind of all alone. And all your efforts are to no avail. And one thing that I want to mention, and this concept comes to us from one of the Christian mystics. I forgot which one. But this is a thing that happens to all of us who are on the spiritual path. And one thing that I want to point out is that if there is such thing as God or, holy beings, angels, and so forth, of course, they're never going to abandon us. They're here to help us, right? So this feeling entirely is generated from within, from some part of ourselves. Now, it seems that it's like a spiritual thing, and sometimes we see it as something inherently almost wholesome, like, a dark night of the soul. We like, my ear is ringing. We sort of glorify it, but what it actually is, and this might come a little bit controversial, is that this is totally an ego trip. It's a trip of the small ego. You see, ego, in psychological terms, ego is our sense of self. It's our state of awakeness, and in the center of it is this concept I. It's like how I experience everything, right? So ego, we cannot exist without ego. We cannot be embodied without ego. But ego has, wholesome and unwholesome aspects. So we have, we have kind of big ego, which is the higher self. and then a small ego, which is this like poor pity me, insecure, always comparing, itself with others, always worrying. It's that part of me that's scared when I think about doing a live video. And also that's the part that is kind of like always expecting something. It's the voice that says, well, I'm doing all of this work, and like, I need to be acknowledged and I need to be rewarded, and so, always looking for recognition, right? So what it is, it's basically attachment. It's attachment to get what we want and what we need at any given moment. And it's the aspect of us that's not happy with how things are, it's always craving for something more. Now, if we look at one of the marks of spiritual masters is that, they're rid of this craving. They kind of rest in themselves, and all of these kind of voices that come, you see, like, voices of ego, they're really just voices. They're not really real. We just over-identify with them. So this part, this voice that comes in that says, I'm not happy, I'm not enough, we could get to a place of just watching that voice kind of like a cloud in the sky. We don't have to attach to it. We don't have to accept it and over-identify with it. And this is what it means to be a master. It's like you rest in the present moment and you just watch the clouds pass by. And it doesn't matter if it's like a positive thing or a negative thing. You stay in your center. So I would say that the dark night of the soul is really just a small ego having a temper tantrum, for not getting what it wants. And, it's not to say, like, it's okay. We all have this experience. There is no problem. There is no, we have to go through these things, in our process of growth. So, we shouldn't put ourselves down for it. It's a natural process. But it's important to know what it is, and not to give it any kind of significance that it doesn't really have. Because, ego loves to hijack our spiritual efforts. And even because Dark Night of the Soul is a thing, it's a phenomenon, and it's ascribed to people who are spiritual practitioners, we automatically take that and make it like a badge. It's like, oh, I am going through the Dark Night of the Soul. It's like, oh, I'm, and again, it's like this over-identification with like, with the suffering or with the whatever. So when it happens, just stay in your center and watch it. Watch what it does. Watch how your ego, kind of struggles, and just sit there and kind of be open to it, and just, it's kind of like being in a state of meditation. And this is what meditation trains us. Meditation is really important. We learn to sit with what is, and we eventually get to a place where we're not totally hijacked by what's happening. We're just kind of, you're watching a movie. You don't have to over-identify with the character. So let's see, I had some notes here. Yeah, another thing that came to mind when I was thinking about the Dark Night of the Soul is that all these concepts that we have, like God, Buddhas, dakinis, gurus, blah, blah, blah. On one hand, we can see them as objective sort of entities, and, there is no problem. Like, for me personally, I do believe that there are beings that are there to help us, like, but that's a personal thing. I'm not gonna, impose my beliefs. Like, we all believe what we believe. But I do want to say that there is always two sides of the coin. There is always the objective aspect of what we believe in, but there is always a corresponding internal subjective thing. So that which we see outside, that which we project out, there is a corresponding element inside. So when we think, when we find ourselves in the dark night of the soul, and we think like, oh, God is denying me or whatever, right? You could also see it as like God that you see externally is really a personification of your higher self that's internal. So, you could see it that some part of you is denying another aspect of you. So like your higher self is denying your small ego, your poor pity me, like pay attention to me aspect. And this also brings to mind something that one of my teachers, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, said. He said, when your ego gets injured, and of course he's referring to the small ego, because when we bring up ego in spirituality, we're always, and we talk about annihilating the ego, we're always referring to the small ego, to the insecure ego. And he said, when your ego is injured, you should celebrate that, because it's the part of you that's keeping you down that's being hurt, not you. So you should, you should kind of, instead of reacting to it, you should welcome it. Okay, let's see. Well, it's been 10 minutes. I said that this is hey. I'm just seeing a lot of the waves. So I could answer some, any more questions. Thank you guys for the kind words. So there is one more thing that somebody sent to me. We are at past the 10-minute limits, but I think I'm doing okay. I'm not freaking out. So I think I could maybe address this as well, even though the person who asked me this question, I sent her a response in a private message, but I will share it here because, maybe you guys are gonna find it useful. It's from Vivian in Guatemala, this lovely person. She asked, do you think the acknowledgement of shadow ever ends? Can all be integrated? Is this enlightenment? So really quick, I think most of us know what shadow is. If we don't, I'm just going to quickly mention that shadow, just like ego represents everything that we want to be, that we want to embody, and ego is mostly conscious. Shadow, on the other hand, is like a depository. Is that a word, depository? It's like a collection of all the things that we wish to get away from. It's like the things we don't want to see about ourselves. So it's shadow material is comprised of unmet needs from the childhood, any secret taboos and inappropriate fixations, insecurities. It could be, I don't know if I mentioned biases, any hypocrisy that we embody, which we all have all of these things. We're human, right? So, but also shadow contains positive elements or skills and qualities that were not encouraged to develop in our childhood because maybe our parents looked down on them or our peers looked down on them. So I'm gonna quickly throw an example. If we have, let's say, a boy who is artistic and sensitive, and he's somebody who expresses his vulnerabilities openly. And let's say he has very traditional parents and he's got oppressive father who is kind of invested in having a manly son. And then anytime a child expresses this artistic, soft aspect of his personality, he's shamed and put down. So as a result, the boy will feel like he cannot be who he is and be loved. So for this reason, he will suppress an entire dimension of his personality in order to be to find approval and love from his father. And this is really sad. This is what I think to some extent we all went through this ourselves. Even if we had wonderful parents, like I said, we're human and things can happen. Parents make mistakes. They have they have best of intentions. They'll still make mistakes. But so this aspect, so this boy's capacity to be in touch with his emotions, to be sensitive, to be artistic, becomes suppressed. And what we suppress doesn't go away. It just gets pushed into the unconscious. And from there, it exerts influence. And it impacts our perception. It impacts it can hijack our hobbies and so forth. So let's not get too much into this. So this is our shadow material. And, Jung was the one who came up with this term shadow. And the modus operandi of the shadow is projection. So what this means is that when things are suppressed in the unconscious, the shadow material, it basically makes us blind to such things within ourselves. That's what it means that it's in unconscious. We don't see it. We're not aware of it. So what happens is then when we see somebody else out there that's embodying the same qualities that we suppressed, we fixate on those other people, and, this triggers us, and it often causes us to feel, angry and, to criticize those people. And the clue here is for us to pay attention to our projections, to pay attention to things in other people that really trigger us, because if we then look back, we sit back and we say, how do I embody these same qualities in myself? If we start to dig, we're going to find it. We're going to find it within ourselves. And then when we do, our job is to accept it, to work through it, to have self-compassion. And once we have worked through it and we have integrated it, when we see it in others, it doesn't trigger us anymore. So this is one kind of sign that we have processed this part of our shadow material, and we have retracted our projections, and now we can move forward from there. So she asked, do you think the acknowledgement of shadow ever ends? From the Jungian perspective, from the psychological perspective, which does not... Oh, there she is. Vivian, hi. I'm just addressing your question right now. Okay. So from Jungian perspective and psychological perspective, which holds that we only have one life, this lifetime, right? So it's not a spiritual. Spiritual perspective is like we have many lives. So that's going to have a different response. From the psychological perspective, the work of integrating the shadow never ends. I recently posted a video where, our mind is like iceberg, floating iceberg, where the ego and the conscious part is just a small tip above the surface of the water, and then the kind of massive foundation that's under the surface of the water, which comprises the majority of the iceberg, corresponds to our unconscious aspect, which is also the majority of our being. So there is a great deal of unconscious material that, is unknown to us. So we never finish doing this work of, the shadow work always continues, and it's like we're an onion and we're always just peeling the layers, right? And the process of taking the unconscious material and making it conscious is what leads us into integration, and it's called individuation. So individuation is Jung's term for enlightenment. So making unconscious conscious. Because a lot of the things that we do springs from the place of unconscious. And that means, we don't really clearly see ourselves. We're not really conscious of what we're doing. We're not, and that also means we're not in control fully. So as we become more conscious and more self-aware, we are actually getting closer to our full potential, our evolution. Now, from the spiritual perspective, is there the kind of moment where we finish this work of integration? In the spiritual context, yes, because as we go from lifetime to lifetime, we kind of, like this lifetime, I'm doing a certain amount of work. I'm learning, right? I'm processing. When I die and I'm reborn, I continue where I left off. So eventually we do get to the point where we can become fully enlightened, fully integrated, fully conscious. There is no more unconscious. But that's like, you know, that's a different subject. I'm gonna stop here. And I'm also gonna quickly, I'm gonna bring Mr. Mumu back. Oh, he's sleeping. My little furry eggplant. Anyway, okay, I'm gonna quickly go and just see if there are any questions or anything. And again, thank you for kind words. And one thing that I forgot to do is, I always try to do this, you know, before you do anything, is to make an aspiration that, you know, whatever it is that I'm doing may be most beneficial, you know, and made to myself and others. You know, it's always good to kind of create that higher aspiration. So, and this is kind of like very alchemical, right? Because whatever we're about to do, because our aspiration is kind of pure, or we want it to be pure, we're more likely to create an outcome that's in line with our aspiration. So I really hope that this has been helpful, that this is gonna foster our connection and our relationship. It's been really helpful to me because, you know, I have a huge ego and I have all these voices as well and insecurities, even though, you know, I may appear to be confident, and I think in certain ways I am confident, but in certain ways I'm not. Like everybody else, we're always a mixed bag, you know. So it's important for us to push our limits and confront ourselves, and, you know, to help others also get out of their shell and encourage them. And this is, yeah, so this is and has been very beneficial for me too. So I'm gonna send everybody love. Thank you so much, you know, for being here, and I will see you again soon in another live session. Bye. Now I have to figure out how to end this. Okay, hold on, let's see. Okay, I think I can press an X. Do you guys know how to end this? All right, 93.